Hi guys, it's Kirsty. Today's video is going to be mostly focused on discussing the mental compulsion of mental checking. So it will be checking feelings, checking our reactions to things, checking if thoughts are still there. But before I go into that, I would like to ask, please do subscribe by clicking on the subscribe button below in order to stay up to date with new videos as they're released. And before I go any further with this video, I would like to say I apologise for not having made many videos recently, the last couple of months. I've had a big life event. I got married, but I also, prior to that, caught COVID. So I went on my hen night with my friends a month before my wedding. So for anybody who doesn't know what a hen night is, it's what us people in the UK call kind of the big night out or weekend or something that we have with our girlfriends or guy friends as well, whoever might come along. And we have kind of a celebration before the wedding. So in America, I think they call it their bachelorettes. And the equivalent, so what my husband did was he had his stag, he had a stag weekend, whereas I had a hen night. So I went out on the first big night out in obviously a year because of COVID. And I caught COVID on my hen night. So I was recovering from COVID for the month run up to my wedding. So once I started to feel a little bit better, it was only about a week and a half left to the wedding. So I had to focus energy on getting the last minute things prepared there. And making up for some of the things that I didn't get done when I was bedridden. So that is why I've been quite quiet recently. And then I had my wedding and then I went away on a little honeymoon in the UK with my husband. So moving swiftly on from sharing my life story, I'll move into the reason why you're actually watching this video, and that's to talk about mental checking compulsions. So in other videos, we would have discussed the way mental compulsions are one of the perhaps harder compulsions to kick. And a big part of that is because sometimes we're not even aware that we're doing these mental compulsions. Because maybe we're not even aware that there are mental compulsions that people may be doing. But once we start to learn more about mental compulsions, it's then another challenge identifying what mental compulsions that we're doing. And then it's another challenge then to stop doing those mental compulsions, because sometimes they become quite automatic after we've been doing it for a while. So we're kind of almost having an intrusive thought and then going into a compulsion immediately. And before you realise it, you've done the compulsion, or you're kind of doing it in your mind. So they can be some of the tricky ones, but we can get under these compulsions. So I will also talk about that in the video. So when I talk about mental checking, I mean it can be done in various forms, and it can be done as a reaction to various different kind of subjects and types of intrusive thoughts, like under all sorts of OCD themes. So it would be that maybe we have an intrusive thought or feeling or urge or something. And so then as a result, maybe we kind of go into our minds and check if we liked that thought or urge, for example, check if we're anxious enough. So we're kind of almost going into our minds and shining a spotlight on our feelings about whatever those kind of, our feelings about the obsession, whether that's urge, an emotion, or if it's a thought. But we kind of almost go into our mind and check how we're feeling about it. Did I like it? Did I want to do it? Or do I like the idea of doing this particular thing? And the reason that we're doing this is, it's either to reassure ourselves that it's that, okay, I didn't like the feeling of that, so it's definitely OCD, or it's to get certainty over a situation. It's kind of find an answer either way. For example, do I love my partner? Yes or no? Checking for those feelings. Or what is my sexuality? And, imagining being with, various different types of people and checking how you feel about that. So it can be done sort of as a response to various different themes and thoughts, and in various different ways. So it can be kind of going in and checking, as I said, our reaction to things and whether we liked it or felt like we wanted it and things. But it may also be, for example, mental checking in reaction to real events obsessions or false memory obsessions. Either way, it's kind of mentally checking, going through the memory bank, trying to dredge up that memory of that thing did actually happen. And same with harm as well, sort of going and checking through the memories. Also with harm, it can be kind of, replaying a feared harm situation in our minds. And sometimes we can think that that's maybe the intrusive thought is the harm, replaying the harm situation in our minds. But sometimes it might be that actually that's become a compulsion where we're replaying in our mind to see how we feel about it, to see if we think that we actually might want to act on it, or, to see if we actually like it, or to see if we're still afraid of it, or to see if we're anxious enough about it, maybe if we're using anxiety as evidence that it's definitely OCD, so therefore it's okay. The thing is with this mental checking behaviour is that obviously it's not helpful to us because it's a compulsion. So I mean that goes without say, really. If you're kind of well versed in how OCD works, we know that that sort of thing isn't good for us because it keeps us locked in the kind of fear cycle, because we're saying to ourselves, well, I need to check constantly about this, because if this kind of feared scenario is real, then that's terrible, and I need to know for certain, otherwise, it's terrible and I couldn't cope and it would be awful. So each time we're doing these mental checks, whether we know we're doing it and we're deliberately sort of going into, or if it's automatic, it is, it's saying that it's reinforcing the belief that the thing that we fear is awful, and therefore giving our brains more reason to keep it coming, keep these intrusive thoughts coming, because I need to keep checking if it's real. We can't take that risk, we can't tolerate the uncertainty there. But also, the more we do this kind of behaviour, the more we check for feelings, or we check how we feel about something, or we check to see if something's real, the more you might find that you're kind of intertwining yourself with the obsession and coming up with answers that you don't want to come up with. So the more you're kind of doing it, the more real it all kind of feels, and the more stuck you feel. And, it might be that if you're checking for certain feelings that you want to feel, the more you're checking for them, the less they're there, and there's numbness or something. And the same applies for example, if you're experiencing obsessions, say sexual obsessions of some description that you don't want to be having. It might be that the more you're checking for some kind of response in your body, actually, because you're shining the light on that and you're thinking about that, you get a response that you don't want to have. So it kind of ends up being a bit self-fulfilling with the mental checking, in that you're focusing on something, or it might be the absence of something. And the more you're going and checking that, it might be that you're coming up short of the feelings that you want to feel, or getting feelings that you don't want to feel, because you're shining a light on them and continuously checking. So firstly, with the approach of dealing with these compulsions, where you can control it, just try and stop it, basically. But if you're finding it difficult that it's happening almost automatically, it's because that you're terrified of what would happen if you're not doing it. So if you're not trying to seek certainty on something, or if you're not trying to get answer to something, you're really afraid of the consequences. And this is where obviously the recovery work comes in. So whether that's exposures that you're working on with a therapist or counsellor or OCD coach or self-directed, whatever you're doing. So exposures are obviously done there's different schools of thoughts about why exposures work and everything. I'm not a therapist, but it's my understanding that it might be done to kind of show that you're willing to accept uncertainty of something. So it's an action that supports that you're willing to accept uncertainty on something that you're afraid of. So obviously, if you're working on exposures, then that can help enforce the belief that you can tolerate the uncertainty. In addition to that, you may be doing some CBT work, depending on the approach that you're taking. On this channel, we talk mostly about rational emotive behavioural therapy, which focuses on changing irrational beliefs into more rational beliefs. So trying to be a bit more flexible in our thinking and identifying where we might be making out something to be completely awful in our minds, or we might be thinking in a very black and white way, as in I can write myself off as a human being. I'd be completely awful if there's even the remotest possibility that this feared scenario is true. So we kind of want to identify the beliefs that are making us fear so badly these, the obsessions, because once we bring the fear down surrounding these obsessions, we can slow the kind of the mental work down a little bit and bring the anxiety down. And once you've done that and you've slowed the mental work down a little bit, you gradually start to gain more control over where your mind goes in reaction to an uncomfortable thought, feeling or urge. You start to gain a bit more control to realise that you've got the urge to check how you feel about it, and you might then be able to say, I'm going to try not to do that, or at least delay it. So this is why it can be, it can be very, very useful to be kind of working on bringing your fear down of certain things that are helping to fuel the cycle, because it slows the thinking down. It helps you to gain more kind of mental control over the response, so you can work better on the response prevention, which obviously is quite important when you're doing exposures. It's good if you're doing exposures alongside cognitive therapy, because whatever type of cognitive therapy that you're doing, depending on the technique of the person that you're working with, hopefully it will be working on ways that you'll not do compulsions in responses to your obsessions and exposures, whether your exposures are deliberate as part of your therapy, or they're exposures that happen to come up just through living life. So as I said, on this channel we focus more on the tech, sort of looking at irrational beliefs, and we work on changing them from "it would be awful if," "I couldn't stand it if," insert feared scenario, to "I strongly don't want this to happen, but in the small chance that it is true, I can accept the uncertainty and continue to live my life as if it is OCD." And if you can accept, if you can unconditionally accept the small chance that this feared scenario is real, then you're better able to tolerate the uncertainty. And if your brain is willing to better tolerate the uncertainty, then you get more control over stopping this obsession compulsion loop that's going on in your mind. So there are various videos about identifying, rational beliefs, orphalizing, which is a term used in REBT, rational emotive behavioural therapy, to describe catastrophizing, which is catastrophizing is, I think it's a typical kind of cognitive distortion that's talked about in mainstream CBT, as is black and white thinking as well. So there are various videos on this channel that you might find useful, that can help you identify where you might be doing these, making these kind of, showing these cognitive distortions essentially, which are fueling the fear. And there are also videos that you can look at the way you can get some help in terms of approaching disputing of irrational beliefs in order to bring fear down, or any extreme negative emotions that you may be feeling. And when I talk about extreme negative emotions, I mean feelings that may cause us to maybe not think straight in the moment and partake in self-destructive behaviours, or kind of do things that aren't particularly helpful for us, whether that's, compulsions or various other behaviours. So if you can bring those emotions down to kind of more manageable feelings about a situation, it can really help us gain more control over what we're doing with our minds, and essentially help us to make more mindful choices of what we're doing mentally or physically. So yeah, I hope those videos will be helpful, and I hope this video has been helpful in terms of going into a bit more details about mental checking compulsions and sort of, approaches to working on reducing them. So thank you very, very much for watching, and take care. Bye.